If I could choose to have any power in the world, I would choose time travel. Researching the past is the closest you can come to that. This is Open Fields School, a small school on Thetford Hill in Vermont. This is the Latham and Kendrick store. Hard to believe, but this is the same place.
The 1820 census of Vermont, the average height of all trees was about 250 feet. You will be very hard-pressed to find a tree that tall today. Most of the trees out here run between 40 and 60 feet tall. And the average diameter of trees, pretty much across all species, was 4.5 to 5 feet in diameter. The lifespan of a maple tree is about 500 years, if left undisturbed. And interestingly, those woods were not like the woods today. Those trees are further apart than the trees are today. So there would be a tree every 20 feet instead of, like we have today, much, much, much closer together.
Thetford was opened to European settlers in 1761. Many of these settlers relocated from places such as Hebron and Lebanon. In Connecticut, they would have traveled on the Connecticut River by canoe. They would have cleared land near the Connecticut River to farm and construct log cabins to live in. There was also a settlement on the Ompompanoosuc River. The waterfalls there made it a good site for mills such as Grinn's Mill and Sawmill. These early European settlers had a log meeting house near present-day East Thetford, but by the 1780s it was too small. After much debate, it was decided that the new meeting house should be built on Thetford Hill, because it was the center of travel. At that time, there was only one settler on Thetford Hill, a man named Beriah Loomis. After the meeting house was complete, more people started moving to the hill. Sometime around 1815, William Harris Latham moved from Lyme, New Hampshire, to Thetford Hill, Vermont. His father, Arthur Latham, ran a very successful general store in Lyme at the site of the current Lyme hardware store. William was going to open a branch of the Latham general store on Thetford Hill with the help of his brother-in-law, Dr. Thomas Kendrick. There were not any bridges built across the Connecticut River in this area, so Latham would have to cross the Connecticut River by ferry boat. Roads between large towns were often toll roads. Travelers had to stop to pay the toll. These were called turnpikes because a long stick or pike was turned out of the way after each person paid the toll. The roads between smaller towns were usually muddy, bumpy, and hard-going. It was not a very comfortable way to travel. Latham had to travel downhill to the banks of the Connecticut River. Then he and his horse boarded a small flatboat using the ferry passengers across the river. The North Thetford Bridge was built in 1822. The East Thetford Bridge was not built until 1839. Once he was across the Connecticut River, Harris Latham had about 2 more miles of uphill travel to get to Thetford Hill. Although it was only 4 miles from Lyme to Thetford Hill. It may have taken Latham all afternoon to get there. He and Thomas Kendrick built a large house split down the middle for their two families. Their house has been called the Double House, and it is still standing in its original location.
Mr. Latham and his brother-in-law, Mr. Kendrick, had to clear the trees in order to have space to build a general store. They would have cut down the trees using axes and crosscut saws. A crosscut saw needs one person on each end to operate the saw. After the trees were cleared, they would have used levers to clear the rocks and hand shovels to dig the foundation.
The round rocks that they dug up were used to make stone walls. Flatter rocks were used in the process of building the foundation.
Latham and Kendrick may have found Abenaki tools, including Native American scrapers, adze, and rubbing balls, while digging the foundation.
So we have to think about the progress of technology. Before water mills were built, there had to be some way to cut boards. So they used a pit saw, digging a hole in the ground, and then one man would stand in the hole and work with one end of the saw. The other man would stand on the ground and work with the other end of the saw, and they would cut boards off the logs. The beams would make the frame of the building, and then they needed wooden boards to side the building.
There we go.
The first floor was used for a general store, and the second floor they rented out to Wilson Farnsworth for a law office. Soon the general store was part of the thriving village.
To help you understand what life was like in the 1830s, I will introduce you to the fictional Thomas family. Let's imagine that Mr. Thomas is going to the general store for some supplies. To trade, he brings some candles his daughters have made, a pound of butter his wife has made, and 100 pounds of potash he made from the ashes in his fireplace. The general store is a place where people gather to talk, play games, and shop. Neither Alice Howe nor Isaac Singer has invented the sewing machine yet, so the people Mr. Thomas sees are wearing hand-stitched clothing. Because it takes so long to make clothing, these people only have 2 or 3 outfits. Mr. Thomas gives his trade goods to Mr. Kendrick. The value of these items is almost $4. In exchange, Mr. Thomas buys boots for his daughter, a wash tub, 3 papers of garden seeds, a dinner pot to hang in their fireplace, a bushel of corn, and a pound of coffee. As a special treat, he buys some almond candy for his children. These items will cost $3.48. Mr. Kendrick keeps track of this transaction in his daybook. He will later recopy this information into his ledger so he knows that the Thomas family has 31 cents of credit at his store. His previous business partner, Harris Latham, has opened a new general store in North Thetford, and he has a similar account book. Meanwhile, Mrs. Thomas and their 2 daughters are at home. Mrs. Thomas is cooking, cleaning, and taking care of the animals, and her daughters, Elizabeth and Jane, are helping her and doing chores of their own. The general store also serves as Thetford Hills post office, so Mr. Thomas checks for mail while he's there. Appointed in 1828, Mr. Kendrick is Thetford Hill's third postmaster. The mail arrives once a week on the stagecoach along with passengers. The goods at the store have probably traveled up the Connecticut River on flatboats and then to a hill on wagons. In another decade, the goods and mail will both be delivered by railroad to a train station in East Thetford.
Fire! Fire! Fire!
In December of 1843, the village heard cries of fire. When Wilson Farnsworth responded, he discovered that his second-floor law office and Latham and Kendrick's store downstairs were burning. He rushed upstairs to rescue his stuff, but only found ashes. We think he may have jumped out a window and into a pile of snow.
Open Field School started by Ms. Jean All. The Thetford Hill Post Office was also in the building. And people used to come in the front door, and then they would turn right, and there was a post office window, and there were a postmistress who would give out the mail. All the little mailboxes were in the back. And so it was a building that was used for many different purposes. And it was very interesting to be a school in the middle of all that.